Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Clark. This recording. Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Clark here for Leadership Conversations. This is a show where we come together to talk about leadership regarding how leadership applies to the world that matters to you. And I'm happy that we're back together. It's been a while.
Yes.
It's been a long while. So on the screen, we have Dr. Latanya Hughes and Dr. Philip Foster. What you guys been doing since the last time we've gotten together like this?
Working, writing, resting, taking care of myself physically. It's important as a leader, as a person, as an individual to take care of yourself. Self-care matters. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't really serve and lead and take care of other people. So really taking some time to slow down, prioritize, and get proper rest. And that's not necessarily just sleeping, but just taking some downtime in a way to decompress the mind and to relax and do what I call mind-numbing entertainment.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I've been doing, and getting a little bit more creative, making jewelry and just having fun and living life and enjoying every possible moment. Because just 2016 was savage. People were dying and leaving out of here left and right, and it didn't matter how old, didn't matter the age. It just really put things in perspective. So
I've taken up, I probably didn't tell you guys this, but you guys know that I do ride my bike. I love my road bike. I picked it up last year. I actually went for my first serious ride of the year last night on my way to Bible study. But I also picked up a guitar.
Wow.
So I am now playing the guitar.
Go ahead on. You got to let it out. Sometimes you got to let it out, figure out a way to be creative, and just, you got to have an outlet.
You sure do.
Yeah, you got to have an outlet.
Yeah. Philip, what have you been up to?
Well, let's see. I believe the last time that we met, I was an adjunct professor and doing all the other things that I do.
Right.
And now I am a full-time professor teaching business. Right now I'm teaching 5 courses, 3 of which are master's level and 2 undergrad. So I'm full-time, and I write, and I consult, and I speak, all the things I had been doing.
Right.
I'm still doing those. And so I need to take Dr. Hughes' advice and do a little more resting.
Right.
In October, we went to the mountains, went to Gatlinburg, and rested for about 4 days. It was really nice to be in the mountains. And then I think a week or 2 later, they had those really bad fires there. So we had just been there right before that happened. So, my heart, my happy place is in the mountains. And so I've been thinking about them ever since. But that's what I've been up to.
Awesome.
Well, let's jump into this topic. We've been off for a while, and I don't even remember where we last left off. I think the last time we were together, we were talking about leadership in business.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, we've had an election. We've had changes in the political landscape, and a number of things have been going on. And so we thought it'd be pretty cool to talk about the adjusting definition of leadership, particularly with new leadership in the White House, new leadership in the Senate, and in the Congress. And before we dive into that topic, tell the audience, guys, how are you defining leadership these days?
Philip, you want to go first?
Sure. My definition of leadership really hasn't changed under the current circumstances. While I will agree that leadership is evolutionary, it does evolve over time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot slower to evolve than what sometimes theoretical books want us to believe. We can pick up any of the books on my shelf or any that you might have in your library and somehow miraculously assume that leadership switches immediately. And I think it's a slower context of change. So for me, leadership really hasn't changed that much, even under the current administrative situation. And so definition of leadership to me is a leader is someone who inspires and who invites people along on a journey, motivates them and invites them to be a part of something. And so to me, leadership is not the command and control that we might think of, where I tell you what to do and you do it. think leadership is more about influence, and the way we influence is probably more of the evolutionary side of what I opened with. So.
For me, I don't think my definition of leadership has changed. I've always said that leadership is a lifestyle. I think I've expanded it to say leadership is a lifestyle of attention, care, and accountability and serving. You can't do any of that without, leadership requires you to take a reflection on yourself, to see what your role and responsibility is in shaping others and the world around you, the environment around you. And that may include, I know you like to talk about self-leadership, and I think it's important. If you can't govern and lead yourself, how can you govern and lead other people? And I don't care if that's a nation, an organization, your home, your church, your community. Doesn't matter. If you can't govern and take care of yourself and lead yourself, be accountable and, take attention and care and serve yourself, how can you turn that around on other people and do that with other people? So I kind of look at it as it's definitely a lifestyle. It's a set of behaviors and values that, kind of outline and really becomes your footprint.
Like that.
Yeah, I like that. And, for me, I think I'm along the same lines as you guys. Leadership is about the influence in other people. And I can tell you, how that applies to me these days. I have a new team that's under me, and, I am doing my best to influence the culture. And as the CEO of Microsoft says, to curate the culture within my team. Because I'm looking for specific outcomes. I don't necessarily care deeply about how we do it. I think there is concern there, but I'm more concerned about the fact that, that folks are thinking along the right lines to get it done. Right. So I'm not trying to be tactical. I'm not trying to be controlling of the steps. But there are some principles that I want to see played out. And a part of that, I think, as you were talking about with the self-leadership piece and all the changes that I've been going through over the past 4 to 5 months, it is imperative that I influence my team to do things that I believe are essential to effective leadership. And like you said, Philip, you can't control folks and make folks do things. There has to be a mechanism that empowers them and encourages them to do something that really is beneficial to them and beneficial to the team.
Right.
And, as a professor, I get to see many different sub parts of the world and life because I see a lot of difference. I have 80 some students right now, and they all have different socioeconomic, political, religious, whatever, cultural differences. And so I get to see a slice of their mindset in their writings. And, recently we asked, what is an authentic leader? And there was a discussion over whether or not Trump was authentic or not. And it made me begin to think, and maybe this is where my definition of leadership has kind of changed since 2016, is this thought of who decides. Is not leadership, and specifically in that case, authentic leadership, is it not as much subjective as it is an observable, objective definition of leadership? Who decides what you are and who you are, or what you think and what you should say? Who decides that? And I think leadership involves greatly individuals who surround you, or you surround yourself with individuals who carry a similar worldview lens in order to reach those objectives. So I think we're seeing that happen now, at least in the political sense, where there's this undertow of whether or not there is other members of other parties trying to sabotage this party. And so the question becomes, in my mind, what is the truest definition, and how do we define that from an objective standpoint without tainting it with our own worldview or lens?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're starting to answer that question. How has your definition of leadership changed since the 2016 election? LaTanya, I mean, what about you? Has your definition of leadership adjusted since the election, or is it still pretty consistent based upon what you're seeing play out? You're on mute.
Oh, I'm on mute. Sorry. I am still learning how to use this thing. No, I think it's I've been pretty consistent with it. I think what I've done and what I am still doing is I'm reinforcing the point about it being a lifestyle and serving. That's really important to me. I think what it boils down to is perspective. We all have a different perspective on what's successful, what's ethical, what's this, what's that. It's all in how people perceive things. And a lot of that is shaped by their environment and their experiences and what they have encountered. So people are looking for, they're looking for a specific response to certain things. For a lot of people, especially in this last election, it boiled down to healthcare, but there's so much more to America than Obamacare and, and Medicaid and Medicare. There's so much more than that. And I'm not saying that those are not important, because it's huge. Healthcare is very complicated, as people are now realizing. I think there's a difference, again, and it boils down to rhetoric. There's a difference between people having healthcare and having access to it. There's two different things there. So I think what we learned very fundamentally and very important in this last election and in the past year about leadership and just overall is the perspective and the perception that people have of leadership and what they expect to see and the response that they want. And when you are desperate and you're in a situation, especially when it comes to your health and your finances, those are the two things that are really kind of strong pain points for people, whether it's them or a family member. I think, it really shapes how people look at other people and the expectation that they have, and it skews sometimes, because it's emotion completely affects everything. And sometimes when it comes to leadership, we have to be able to check our emotions. Sometimes we don't always do a good job. I know I personally don't, because stuff gets under my skin. Let's be real. We're human beings. We're people. God gave us emotions for a reason. We do need, I think we need, as overall as humans, we need deliverance in our soul, which is where our emotions are housed. But overall, I think what we saw, especially in 2016 with the election, was how emotions and tension can really shape not only an election, but the outcome of an election, and just how that can affect communities as a whole. So for me, I don't think it's so much change so much as it is pushing me to reinforce what I've been saying and what I believe about leadership as a whole, and how if we really see it as a lifestyle, we can really increase and start to improve our own unique footprints in the earth, in this world, and how we shape our environments.
Dealing with leadership from a subjective standpoint, I try very hard to surround myself with people who do not always think 100% like I do. And I think even in this small circle here, we're colleagues, we're friends, just Dr. Hughes as an example. I know you have challenged me on some things in the past, and with good reason. And I think that as leaders, from the subjective standpoint, maybe this is where my evolution is starting to happen, is realizing that I can't be around people that are constantly saying, yeah, right on, that's it, you're right. I need people that are going to say, well, what if? Because in the example of Dr. Hughes saying to me, we got to be careful about this, that, or the other, it makes me think, how am I coming across? And it also makes me have to take responsibility for maybe things I need to take responsibility for and say, you're right. And so all that to say, from the subjective standpoint, I have to be able to clean out my house when I need to, but I can't do that if I'm constantly around people that say yes, yes, yes all the time.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. One of the practices that I've adopted in my own leadership style is 9 times out of 10, like most people, I have my own opinion. I think I'm going to echo. But 9 times out of 10, I have my own opinion. But one of the things I've learned is how to ask people what they think about a situation or a decision to get their opinion. Am I wrong? Do you see it differently? Do you have a different perspective? And what that does, it actually lowers the guard of people to make them feel safe to share. But it also strengthens my leadership, and I think that's the point you were making, Philip. And I think to that point, one of the things I do want to talk about is, given the observed leadership style of the current president, how do you suggest people adjust their leadership style so that they can work with him and get things done? Because yesterday he gave a speech and people are positive about it. There is a concern, though, that will that speech hold up, and will there be consistency? So how would you advise people, whether they're in Congress or the Senate or outside parties looking to work with the president, how do you suggest that they adjust their leadership style, if at all, to work with this president?
Philip is probably not. Philip is probably not going to be surprised by my response, because I have been saying this since last year. I think it's going to be a matter of putting aside labels, party lines, agendas, and all of that to truly serve the American people. I hate the whole idea of labels, and I hate that, because I think what we're doing is now we're putting America in a box, and everybody is, did I say something? I think I did something weird. I don't know, but anyway, everybody has, I have this little note about my internet, but everybody has, it's liberal, it's conservative, it's left, it's right, it's this, it's that, all of these different boxes that keep us segregated. If we're supposed to be united, the United States of America, then why do we have a box for this, a box for this, a box for this? And the more we keep speaking and saying and talking about these different agendas, and I get that everybody has their perspective, I get that everybody has their point of view, I get that everybody has their needs, I get that, but we'll never have open conversation. We'll never be able to come to the table and reach some type of consensus. And I don't believe that, and I know that it's very hard, because inclusion and diversity makes for strange bedfellows. It's very hard. We're not going to please everybody. It's just too many people in the United States. There's 7 billion people on the planet. It's too many people in the United States of America. We're not going to agree on everything, but we have to get to the point where we can say, you know what, I'm going to agree to disagree. Now that we agree to disagree, let's move past this. How can we move forward to really come up with solutions, real conversations and solutions that can address healthcare, that can address people who have these needs, that can address the poor, working poor, middle class. At the end of the day, we have differences. We have economic differences. We have differences in health. We have differences in initiatives. We have differences in lifestyles. And whether I agree with your lifestyle or not, the United States of America may have been founded on a Christian foundation, but it's also been founded on a principle of inclusion and diversity. And just because I may not agree with abortion, I may not agree with LGBT, I may not agree with transgender, I may not agree with, buying this, I may not agree with whatever it is, I may not agree with immigration, I may not agree, but I need to respect everybody's right to their difference of opinion, to what it is, their constitutional right to live and be an American. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of controversy about immigration. My thing about it is, it don't take you 8 years to become a natural citizen. Do what you're supposed to do to be an American. If it matters that much to you to live and be here in America, just do it the right way. And I've said this on my Twitter. So I think that we have a lot of controversial topics that this administration is not afraid to bring to the forefront. I don't agree with their perspective on it, but I do like the fact that in this Congress, in this administration, we're seeing a lot of controversial topics that have been buried, that we as Americans like to put a Band-Aid over because it's not comfortable conversation. We don't like to deal with it. But I think it's important, in order for us to heal, at some point you've got to take the Band-Aid off. You've got to start applying some Neosporin. You got to start applying some antiseptic. You got to start applying some stuff, and that it starts with having open conversation. And understanding different people's perspective and perception, getting rid of all of these labels and boxes and really having hard conversations, and then saying, how do we come to a conclusion that's going to be in the benefit of seniors, this, that, because it's complicated. It's really complicated. That's my long way around.
So Dr. Hughes kind of touched on some things that I can openly say she's challenged me on, and that is the labeling issue. And, you know, as someone who really aspires to be fair and equal and seeking diversity and all of that, celebrating it, whatever, I have to sometimes admit that I get caught up in that label system, maybe more than I care to admit. Right. You know, and I think that part of that comes from years of programming, and it's something we have to consciously work ourselves out of. And, you know, the thought that came to me as Dr. Hughes was speaking is the idea of diversity equals differences. Now, if I could just go from preaching to meddling for just a minute and just say, I remember growing up as a kid, you know, I was very much a adolescence in the Reagan era. And so I can remember as far back as, you know, Jimmy Carter being president on up to present day. So now I'm aging myself. But my point is, I don't remember a time like to the present where diversity has become a bad word.
Right.
I remember as a youth and growing up that when you had a disagreement with someone, it was just a disagreement. You didn't, you know, it's kind of like that joke that, you know, guys can go and beat each other up in a bar fight and be best friends drinking beer the next day, and women will be mad at each other for 30 years. You know, it's that kind of idea, you know, and again, that's labeling, but I'm just saying it was that kind of idea where, you know, hey, we didn't agree. We beat each other up. Now we're friends again. You know, we're playing marbles in the sand. Today, if I say, I don't like what you said, you're an idiot, and I'm never talking to you again. That is the world that we're in. And so diversity becomes a bad word. It becomes a cuss word, if
right.
you will.
Right.
And I'm like, that is baloney.
Right.
You know, just because I may or may not agree with my colleagues here for whatever subject you bring up does not make us enemies. And as a matter of fact, I have greater admiration for Dr. Hughes or Dr. Clark if they say to me, I don't agree with you, then I'm able to say, okay, well, do I need to check my lenses? Do I need to check myself at the door and say, is this something that I need to put into my evolutionary hopper of leadership or personality or whatever it is? You know, I will say this too. I did watch the presidential speech last night. And if you ever have occasion to look at my Twitter, you'll know where I stand on all this. But I was furious with our politicians. And I'm not even going to say which side because I'm not going to add that label to it. I was furious when politicians were sitting there with sour grapes. And it's like, get over it. We're Americans. Right. We need to work with each other. You lost, you won, whatever the case may be, stop it. Let's just move on.
Be adults.
Yes.
Be adults.
And, you know, so what if maybe, you know, my candidate won and I'm happy? That's different. That's fine. But you know what? I have been on the losing end of candidates for years.
Right. And
while I may have shown my displeasure on the loss, never in my mind have I seen temper tantrums like this.
Right.
A leader cannot. What I saw last night, some of those people sitting in that room, that was not leadership.
Right.
And maybe like I said, maybe I'm moving into meddling right now, but it bothers me that we are the United States of America, the home of the brave and land of the free, and we're sitting there sucking our thumbs and throwing a temper tantrum because we don't like the person who, you know what, they didn't have to show up.
Right.
You don't have to watch him on TV. Turn him off.
Right. Because Maxine Waters didn't go.
I choose not to watch a lot of things on TV. That doesn't mean that I am telling the person they're going to hell or they're sinning or whatever. That it's just not for me.
I agree with you. I think, Representative Maxine Waters didn't go. I think it matters more that if you are an elected official, as particularly, you have a responsibility to your constituents and voters to make a professional concerted effort to be respectful. And if you can't do that, because you're on TV, the cameras are going to get on you at some point, even if they don't. You're there representing the people who voted for you. You have a responsibility to, and again, it goes back to my definition of the set of values and behaviors that establish your footprint. And people aren't voting for you to sit there to act like a child, stopping around like somebody stole your bike. It is what it is. This is where we are. How can we move forward? And it's like getting the information. I feel like last night is definitely indicative of a lot of the backlash that I'm seeing of particularly African Americans and students from HBCUs. And I tweeted about this morning, how they're vandalizing their campus because the HBCU presidents actually met with the president and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, for years you complained about not having a seat at the table. You get a seat at the table and you're mad because you don't like the person at the head of the table. That doesn't make any sense. That's like you're saying, I'm hungry, but I'm gonna sit at the table and not eat. That's like drinking, and then you're going to vandalize your own campus. That's like drinking poison and hoping the other person die. That doesn't make any sense. It comes a point that if for nothing else, get the information. You can't come up with a strategy or a plan to work with or against this person or the administration or whomever if you don't have the information. You can't fight a fight that you don't even know what you're fighting. This is not like a schoolyard where you know the bully and you can see the bully and you know everything you know about the bully, but you may not know how the bully gonna come at you when you go on that yard. I think at some point we have to start holding these officials and these people accountable for their behaviors. I'm not trying to be funny, but for 8 years, I saw some of the same foul behavior on the other side of the table because our president was Black.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to be funny, but at the end of the day, a lot for the past 8, I'm going to say probably longer than 8 years, racial tensions have been high. It's probably escalated even more, and it's just all coming to the forefront. But at what point do we as citizens start to say it's time to stop it? It's time to grow up and expect more from our elected officials.
That's right. And if I could just add one more thing, to this matter of how do we adjust to this idea of a particular person in office? I would say this: Donald Trump, who is our president, he was elected. We've accepted that. He is a businessman.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. First and foremost. Now, you can argue whether or not he's a millionaire or billionaire. It doesn't really matter. What we do know is that he has been in business for 50, 60 years. I don't know. He's in his 70s, so he's been in at least 50 years. He's been in business because he started as a teenager in his dad's company. We know he's successful. The problem is that people that are in government aren't used to taking input from a businessman. They're used to taking it through taking input through this governmental filter that we've had. And so part of the issue is these people who are rejecting him, it's for a myriad of different reasons. But if they reject him because he's a businessman, that's foolishness.
Right.
You can reject him because you think he's xenophobic. You can reject him because you think he's the KKK or whatever. You list it. You put it down. You hate him because he doesn't like abortion. I mean, there's a whole list and litany of arguments that they have out there. But the bottom line is if you reject him because he's a successful businessman, it's foolishness.
Right.
And I will tell you that what we can witness, and you can see this in corporations, and we're seeing it play off in a national stage in public right now, that these government officials who are rejecting the leader for whatever reason it is, I would guarantee you by the next time that their election comes around, they will not be in office.
Right.
They are shooting themselves in the foot. And I'm telling you, if you're a mid-level or a junior level rather leader, and you're doing this foolishness in your company, you are not going to get elevated to anything else. No. And as a matter of fact, they may show you to the door. So if I were to give any advice, it's like, you don't have to like your boss, but you do have to show up to work.
Right.
Okay. Now, I may think my boss is a jerk, and I may not tell him that to his face. By the way, I'm my own boss, so I still look in the mirror. But my point is, I may not like my boss, but I still got to show up to work. I still have to do my job.
I think another aspect of that too is you may not like them, but you need to respect the office and the authority that they have. I think what we have seen, especially over the past, at least because we saw it even with President George W. Bush, Bush Jr., where people were disrespecting the office. We have to understand that the president of the United States of America is not a person. It's an office. And we've seen a lot of disrespect of the office of the president of the United States of America for a long time. And it goes, I know I saw it when, like I said, when President Bush was president. We may not agree with him, and he made a lot of mistakes, and I think he's admitted to that. But you don't disrespect the office of the president of the United States of America. And what we've seen, even going all the way back to him, was a lot of disrespect for the office. So we don't really have a good understanding of respecting authority. You don't have to like the authority, but respect it. Now, I will be the first to say I don't respect abusive authority. I will say that, and I'll go to my grave saying I don't respect abusive authority, because we don't live in a dictatorship. I'm not trying to be bothered with, it's no different than an abusive relationship. If you counsel somebody who's in an abusive relationship, you're going to tell them what? Get out for the sake of saving your life. But when it comes to authority, as far as an office, that's where I think we've reduced, especially the president of the United States of America, to a person. Mm-hmm. And it's not. And so I think when we kind of get back in our minds as a nation, as a people, what the president of the United States of America is, then we can start having conversation. And a lot of that disrespect came from within. It didn't start from us on the outside. We learned. It's just like children. Children learn from their parents. They learn as they pick up stuff from their parents and different things. It started from within. And now we have this, what I'm gonna call it, a cancer that has spread to the American people, that now we're trying to get a handle on a lot of the same abusive behavior and attitude. That it's like, how do we change course? How do we change direction? It's just like, trying to change a ship that's in the middle of a terrible, terrible storm with the winds and everything crashing all at one time. It's not easy to change that rudder. It's not easy to turn that rudder, to turn direction and get off course. You just, at this point, you got to sail through the storm. But you got to have a strategy on how to sail through that storm.
That's right. That's right.
It's interesting. You guys were talking about, how leaders need to adjust to what's happening in the White House. And I think, Philip, you made a great point, right? We never had a president who's been, at least in our lifetime, who's been an outright businessman. And I think that's part of the attraction.
Or at least in a couple hundred years.
Right. And I think that's part of the attraction some folks may have had to Trump. And I think, you're so right? So leadership cannot be stagnant. It cannot be limited to just one way of doing things. I think there comes a point where you do have to make decisions as leaders, right? The goal, is to influence people to do something, but at some point, somebody has to decide what to do, when to do it, how to do it, with all the input that has been received. And I think this is a shameless plug for an article, a book chapter that's coming up with ILA that I wrote about in terms of inclusive leadership, right? Inclusive leadership does not mean we have a large tent and we make this collective decision. I mean, what it literally means is that we filter through bad ideas together to make sure we have the best idea that floats to the top so we can move forward. Our time is winding up, and I wanted to get your thoughts on some practical steps people can take who may be struggling with a leader that they feel is not being fair or open-minded. To that emerging leader who's listening and who's new to mid-level management, who's caught between leading a team and following a leader, and based upon the examples that we're seeing play out in our political sphere, how do you guide them to navigate similar waters that are actually happening real time in our political landscape?
Well, go ahead.
My answer is going to be short because it's real simple. I say be true to yourself. It's important to remember your why and stay committed and focused on your plans, whatever that was. A business plan or marketing, and your marketing plan is a working document for a reason. You have to be true to yourself. Your why is not the same as the next person's why. I think part of the problem is why people will fall into hard times or whatever the case may be is because they lose focus. They get off course. They start looking at what this person is doing and that person is doing and how this person is adjusting. No, your plans are in place for a reason. You have to remember your why. And when you remember your why, you'll stay committed and focused. And then you'll take whatever necessary steps you put in your business plan. Yeah, you may need to adjust your business plan, but how to adjust your business plan is going to be in your why in the first place. What's your unique essence in your business? What's the foundation of your business? And yours is not going to be the same as the next. You can't tell me that a political environment is going to change your business, because if that's the case, your business is going to change with every wind of doctrine that flows, and that's not going to be consistent. But the people and the businesses that have longevity, that's been around for years, they weather the storms. Why? Because they stay true to themselves. They know what their why is, and they stay focused on their business plan, and their strategy is their strategy, and they're not trying what this one is doing and that one is doing. They're not trying every fad, but they go back to the core. What is your company's core values? Why are you doing what you're doing in the first place? When you stay consistent and true to yourself, and you stay focused and committed on that, I think you'll be fine.
So, I'm sitting here thinking about how do you coach a mid-level or junior executive to deal with the dislike or distrust of a senior executive or even the board.
Right.
And I have a couple of thoughts. So the first thought is you're a junior or a mid-level and that you don't know everything.
Right.
That's not saying you're stupid.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you don't have access to all the information. So even looking at people who are sitting there throwing a tantrum at a presidential, speech, I'm sitting there going, they think they know it all, but there's something they don't know. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to even pretend I know what it is. But, it's important to trust your leadership. Mm-hmm. You have to. And so that goes to the other point that I've already made, and that is you're at the table. Do you want to stay at the table? At some point, Trump can say, you know what, I'm tired of you. You're not even showing up anymore. We're not even inviting you. Mm-hmm. I would rather see them fighting it out. And trust me, you go back to Obama and when Obamacare, ACA, or whatever you want to call it was happening, right. And they showed them in the conference room and there's Obama sitting there and he's giving the smackdown to, some Republican. That was in the public, right. And they were going at it. Right. And they were telling each other about themselves. Right. But at some point, Trump is of the personality. He's going to say, I've had enough of your foolishness. You're not invited anymore. And if I qualify that or quantify it to what happens in boardrooms every day in corporate USA or corporate global whatever, people who act the fool are asked to leave. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather be at the table angry than to not be at the table at all. Mm-hmm. So, how do we cope with disagreement? You better be sitting at the table. Right. That's how you cope. If you're not sitting at the table, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. Mm.
I think it boils down to as well, sometimes you have to know what battles to fight, and it may
That's right.
Up, which is I think I don't know if I put this in my notes, but I did. I did. I said sometimes it's important to wait for all the facts, and sometimes you just need to be quiet and know which battles to fight. Wait for everything to come in. I know we're so used to respond out of emotion. Again, emotional responses don't lead to anything. We can't get anywhere if we're in our emotions. And I think that clouds a lot of people's judgment issues, and it makes matters worse, and it makes it difficult for us to reach a consensus or any type of anything that's in the best interest, particularly if we're talking about government and politics, in the best interest of the American people. So I think when we start talking about leadership and what we can do and how we can improve and all of these different things, sometimes you have to pick your battles, and you have to know when to hold them and when to fold them. You have to know when to keep your mouth shut and sit. Like you said, it's better to sit at that table and be mad. You could be spitting nails mad, but at least you're at that table getting the information.
That's right.
I think that matters, because again, you can't come up with a strategy or plan, like I said earlier, if you don't know the information, if you don't even know what's being talked about. You can't have a response. So I think sometimes we need to think and be strategic. It takes maturity. We all need to grow up. And what we've seen is we have some elected officials that are not acting like adults on both sides.
That's right. That's right.
All over the place.
That's
I don't care if it's Green Party, Independent, whatever, all these different labels. We're not seeing maturity from the people who are leading us, who we have elected. And I want to say that as a citizen, yes, I've done my due diligence. Yes, I do get out and vote. I think there's a lot of people who don't, who are raising all kinds of foolishness, and you need to go get somewhere and sit down because you should have voted. I think we are responsible for the mess that we're in, that we are experiencing. We don't like who's in office, but we don't get out and vote. We only vote for the presidential election, but we don't vote every 2 years that an elected official in Congress or in Senate or the House comes up, and we're not satisfied. If you have a 30% approval rating or less, but you get reelected anyway, what does that say about us as the American citizens?
That's right.
What responsibility and accountability do we have to hold leadership accountable when we're not turning out to vote, or we re-electing people that we're not happy with in the first place? So at some point, we have to be accountable for what we contributed as far as our vote, whether we threw it away and didn't vote, or we just voted for the same person because they've been there for 90,000 years and we really don't have no confidence in the person that we don't know. But I think if you want change, you're going to have to get somebody different and a different face in there. But if you're looking for change for somebody that's been in there 60 years.
Crickets.
Thank you. It's just not, I think one of the things too is we have to be realistic. And we just got to be realistic about some things. But I just think that we unnecessarily make leadership complicated when it's not always complicated. I think we do have the president who is a businessman, and like Philip said, we haven't had that in years, in hundreds of years. It's a new dimension. He's also learning how government works. So you have someone who's very anti-government, who's learning how government works. And so he's learning that the business principles he thought he would be able to bring to the table may not necessarily work. So now he's got to tweak. And that's going to take some adjusting for everybody. But at the end of the day, he's true to himself. I can't argue with the fact that he's very true to himself. He knows what his why is, and he's committed and focused on what he's true to, whether that's in the best interest of everybody in America or not, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Just get somewhere and focus and wait for all the information. Wait to see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? I think that also matters. And like you said, Philip, having a seat at the table is better than having an attitude and getting put out.
That's right.
As we can see, he don't have no problem putting people out. He don't have no problem with the press not having access, which means we as the American people don't have access because who's reporting?
That's right.
So I think we've got to play it smart and know how to play your hand.
If I could just bring it full circle, I began this discussion talking about students and how they were discussing the idea of authentic leadership. Mm-hmm. And the consensus was that Trump is not an authentic leader. Mm-hmm. And what I pushed into them was, I'm not sure, and I went through the litany of definitions of what an authentic leader is, but the essence of it is what Dr. Hughes just said. He's true to himself.
Right.
And, the other thing that Dr. Clark was chatting offline or off to the side, was, if a leader is trustworthy, we can follow them. Looking at someone and defining that they are an authentic leader or not, and whether or not they're trustworthy, are subjective biases that we place upon someone. Right. Now, when I say that, I also recognize that trustworthiness has an objective bias as well. And that is, I have to do something for you to either trust or not trust me.
Right.
But I have to be consistent in that activity over and over and over again. The thing that bothers me right now is, and listen, I'm guilty of this when Obama was president. I was guilty of this when Bush was president. They were not my favorite presidents, and I'll just say it up front. But I was guilty of this as much as anyone. I didn't trust them. Mm-hmm. But why didn't I trust them? Because I was looking through a biased lens of some sort. Now, that doesn't mean I was racist or this or that or the other. It was just that I didn't trust them for something. Was it their rhetoric? Was it their platform? What was it? Was it fair that I didn't trust them in the early days? For example, they don't trust Trump right now. He's only been in office a month or whatever. Is it fair for me to not trust him because of something that allegedly happened? I have no bias one way or the other on trustworthiness at that point. That becomes a subjective issue. Right. So I guess the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is, if a leader is being true to themselves, and we can look at that truth, that trueness in them through an objective lens, then whatever biases we have is on us. Right. And the only way we're going to stay at the table is to keep those biases in check.
I think one of the things is about triggers, and I typed this in a chat box. Triggers affect people's trust. Behaviors, patterns, things that happen that people do that trigger something within us affect people's level of trust.
That's right.
And again, it leads to bias. We are all naturally biased. Like for me, I'm gonna tell you right now, any signs of aggression, I don't know what to tell you. That's a trigger for me. It's not even open for discussion for us to have a relationship or for us to have a conversation, because you're overly aggressive and that makes me uncomfortable. And because I'm uncomfortable, I'm not gonna stay in a toxic. To me, over aggression equals toxic, any type of toxic environment. So that's a trigger for me.
Right.
And I don't have a problem saying that, but I use that as an example because I believe it affects trust, because that tells me automatically you're probably somebody I'm not going to be able to trust myself around, or I'm not going to be able to trust to put my life or anything in your hands because you're too aggressive right now. I can't. So I think triggers affect people's trust. So if somebody's making decisions that trigger something to you as an individual, again, that's how we saw a lot of that in the past couple of elections. And that brought, as you were talking, Dr. Foster, that's what got to me was triggers affect people's trust.
That's right.
So even with President Bush and with the Clintons and with, President Obama and President Trump and all these different people, there are triggers that these people made decisions, they made speeches, they did something that triggered something with people that said, I can't trust you, I don't, And so I think that these triggers affected the outcome of Hillary Clinton and President Trump and all of that. So again, a person's trustworthiness, again, I agree. It's very subjective because it depends on what they are doing, what type of footprint have they left or established for themselves that has become a trigger for people to not trust them. And
that's right.
Runs the gambit because you're going to have some people. People are going to either love or hate you. That's at the end of the day, people are going to love or hate you. And so what you do with that information, I think that is the telltale of a leader, what they do with that information. Now, you can't, let people run you, but at the same time, I'm of the persuasion that if you start hearing the same information about yourself, if one or two people say, oh, you're not accountable, but you got 50 people say you're the most accountable person in the world, are you going to listen to 50 or 2? Same principle applies. If 50 people say you got an attitude problem, but 2 people say, girl, I ain't got no problem with your attitude, are you going to listen to the 50 or the 2? So it really depends on, if 50 people are telling you something, why are they telling you? Is it for your good? If it's for your good as a leader, now it goes back to my definition of accountability. I'm taking attention and care and accountability of myself so I can serve other people. Because if 50 people are saying I have an attitude problem, I can't serve those 50 people or anybody that they are connected to, because that's a trigger for them. And therefore, it's a trigger for those 50. And you can count at least 2 or 3 people off of every one of those 50 people. So guess what? Now, who are you effectively leading if these 50 people plus the people that they're reaching feel like you have an attitude problem, which means, guess what? How effective are you as a leader? So I think triggers do affect people's trust, and it affects other people, especially as influential as people become. It becomes a cycle of behavior. No, you don't want to become a yes person. And it goes back to what you said in the very beginning, Dr. Farson, when you opened up talking about surrounding yourself with people who only agree with you. You'll never grow as a person, ever. I have people who challenge me all the time. I see stuff online all the time, and I'm just kind of like, but at the same time, you have to grow and mature enough beyond the fact that I can still love this person. I can still be friends with this person, even though we disagree.
And thank God.
And it may be hard to do. It's hard to do because it's just be like, do you really believe that? But at the same time, it's like, no, I'm still going to be friends with you. Even though I disagree with you, I'm still going to be friends with you. What does that have to do with me? Just because you think that way doesn't mean I have to think that way. But it takes a great deal of maturity to get there so that I'm not biased against this person, and then eventually start unloving this person and start treating this person in a different kind of way, because leadership is a lifestyle.
I'll end it with this. I know we're over time here, but I grew up in the South, and my mom is from the deep South, and so I grew up, with around certain ideals.
Right.
I'm not saying I agree with them, but I'm just saying I grew up around it. And so one of the better ideals that I ran into was in little towns in deep South. You can go into the Greasy Spoon, it's the Meat and Three. It's the restaurant that's on the square. And they all have this thing. It's a table, usually in a small town. It's called the Liars Club. And it's usually it's a bunch of old men. It used to be a bunch of old white men, but in more recent years, it's quite a diverse group of men that usually gather, and in some cases women. And they gather around these tables and they tell stories. Mm-hmm. But what is really interesting about the Liars Club tables that I've been around and been near is that they all sit there and they talk about politics and religion and all the other things that go from preaching to meddling. And you can hear them arguing and carrying on and going back and forth. Nobody's throwing water or salt and pepper shakers or food. They're not raising their voice, but they're having a really interesting disagreement discussion.
Right.
And I wish that we could get back to that as a nation.
Right.
Again, Dr. Hughes and I have had some really interesting conversations even offline. She's taken me to challenge on some, and I've appreciated that so much. It doesn't mean that she and I agree.
Right.
And I sense that there's been times she probably hasn't agreed with me, and I'm okay with that because I trust her. I respect her, and she's my friend, and she's my colleague. And at the end of the day, I will tear down walls for her, and I'll rip through ceilings for her because she's my friend and she's my colleague. Now, again, I could still go back to having that argument with her about something I don't agree with. That doesn't mean I don't have to save her life or take her side and have her back. And that is, as Americans, when I used to teach international students, most of them were non-Christian. I was raised Christian. I would say to them when we were talking about diversity, you cut my hand, I cut your hand. We both bleed red. We both bleed the same type of blood. If you and I are the same blood type, I can save your life by giving you a transfusion. Take in a deep breath, let out a deep breath. I take in a deep breath and let out a deep breath. We're both breathing the same air. As a matter of fact, if you really want to get messed up in the head, think about it. everyone that has ever lived on this planet has had the air that you're breathing pass through their lungs. Mm-hmm. Think about that and blow your mind. So we are part of the human race. We are part of the earth race, and we need to put aside our human condition and start being human beings.
Right. Boils down to love, honey. Love. It just, in one of my definitions, I was researching leadership this morning, and I love researching Latin, and one of the Latin words for Latin words actually means, and it has love, object of love. You just can't leave without love at some point in your heart somewhere for other people.
That's right.
Otherwise, and I think that's part of the problem. We have people who don't even love themselves. So you can't love and take care of other people.
That's right.
Love yourself. So,
what's your shameless plug?
Shameless plug. Well, I got a couple books, and I got another one coming out on Monday. Hopefully, I can get it all done. I have 2 books. My first book is Pillars for Christian Mentoring, where I developed the pillar and plus models of leadership. I also have Pillars for Public Servants. Yes, you want to get this book if you are a public servant. And that doesn't mean just an elected official. That means if you are a city mayor, if you work for the city, if you work in any public office, I don't care if you're a customer service clerk at the health and Human Services Department, you want to get that book. It's amazing. I talk about a little bit of everything, but it's also based on my pillars model and how you can progress and move forward in your aspirations as a public servant. I also have a book called A+ Leadership, The A+ Leader, coming out again this coming Monday on my birthday. So get it. It's the gold standard of leadership. It's it's based off of my plus model of leadership that I wrote about in this book here. And I possibly will be presenting at the roundtables at Regent University. I'm working on a proposal for that. And might be doing 2. Dr. Foster and I was working with another colleague on how we can have open conversation on some controversial issues. And we're thinking about kind of presenting that and how we can have open conversation and reach some type of resolution on a lot of the race issues and some other things going on here in America. So check me out. I'm everywhere. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Pinterest, Dr. Latanya Hughes. I have a website, www.globalmentorcoach.com. And catch me around.
Shameless plug. Well, again, I'm Dr. Foster, and you can find me online at MaximumChange.com. We have a brand new website that's up and running, so that's exciting. We're still working on it, but it's up and running, and I'm happy about that. You can find me on Twitter at Maximum Change, as well as LinkedIn. I don't do a lot of Facebook, so at least from the business side, it's not conducive for what I do. But I do have a Facebook page, Maximum Change Inc. and Dr. Philip A. Foster. Both are on there. Shameless plug. I have a book out. Let me just grab it here. I meant to have it with me. It's The Open Organization. We're now in the 2nd edition of this text, and you can get it on Amazon at a very reasonable price. It is a paperback, but it's currently being used in an MBA program, and I think it's being evaluated for a doctoral program. I know that there's also another master's program looking at it as well, so it's really exciting. You can also find me as a contributing author on opensource.com. It's part of the open world that I belong to. So you can check me out there. I am currently working on my 3rd book, and that has been kind of an epic battle to get back into writing since I've been full-time faculty. So it's been hard to get back into writing. I'm probably about a quarter of the way through my 3rd book as far as writing is concerned. So that's what Dr. Foster's been up to and what he's planning on doing here in the near future.
Great way to talk about yourself in the 3rd person. So I've been working on a bunch. April 1st is the Emerging Leaders Conference, and I'm hosting here in Hartford, Connecticut. It's an opportunity for leaders who at the mid-level who are trying to figure out their leadership style and approach as they look to advance their careers. I've written a bunch of books. You can find my stuff at elipatrick.com. I'm in the process of drafting a book now for emerging leaders from the perspective of how to find them and how to elevate them. And so that's coming along quite nicely. And I'm thinking about a proposal at the Regent Roundtable, so that's coming up as well.
Awesome.
Got a published book chapter that's coming up about inclusive leadership that should be out sometime in March or April this year. And finally getting around to publishing my full doctoral research on sustainability for nonprofits and churches. What is the mechanism to make sure that your organization is able to stay around for a long time? So that's coming up as well. So we got a lot going on, but I think for those of you who are watching this broadcast or this stream, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We expect to be back consistently on our regular schedule. So check out whatever medium you're looking at, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, or any other mechanism. Check us out, and we look forward to seeing you guys next time. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.